Okay, well, hello everyone. My name is Tim Cross. I'm senior reporter at Video Week, and this is our panel looking at what does the next generation of broadcasters and platforms look like. I think it's pretty well accepted now that we need to see some sort of evolution from broadcasters over the coming years. Ofcom, towards the end of last year, for example, put out a statement talking about like the necessity of evolution for broadcasters to even survive, which is pretty heavy words. And we also are seeing movement on that front from the broadcasters in the UK, for example. Channel 4 towards the end of last year released their Future 4, I think it was called, strategy, which is looking at how they're planning to evolve and adapt to a more CTV first world in the next 5 years. Obviously, ITV with Planet V has made some interesting moves on the sales side of things. So we are seeing transformation. And then obviously you've got the newer entrants as well, who are kind of becoming more and more established. So on this panel, we're kind of going to be looking at what that evolution is going to be looking like and making a bit of an assessment of the progress we're making. So I guess picking up on that point specifically, we have been talking for a long time about how broadcasters should and are evolving. But I'm getting a sense that it's important now more than ever. Why do you think right now it's particularly important that broadcasters should be evolving rather than just having this be a conversation that it would be nice to do this, but we're not actually making any changes?
Shall I jump in? So I'm Katie Coatman. I head up ad sales for Discovery in the UK and Ireland. So I guess I'm pretty well placed to talk about this. I think COVID in particular has accelerated viewing behaviours that had already begun. We all know that linear viewing is declining, although much slower than some people like to think, but it is still declining. But as we've seen this enormous growth of viewing to on demand, both in terms of SVOD and AVOD, in the last kind of 12 months, it's really put the pressure on broadcasters like ourselves to make sure that we're future-proofing our businesses. So I think that's why there's an increasing focus at this time on accelerating those kind of where are we going to be in the next 3 to 5 years' time, really, from a viewing perspective, and so that's where our content needs to be. So that's kind of my thoughts on why it's so important now.
So just to build on that, Katie, so my name's Emma Newman. I'm the CRO of EMEA for Pubmatic. I think that it's almost impossible to have a conversation about anything at the moment without talking about COVID. But I do think that, it has been the trigger point, if you like, for that acceleration from a broadcast perspective in terms of the change of viewing habits, right? So we've definitely seen it over 2020 where more people are at home and, they're engaging more in, linear and also connected television. I don't think that behaviour is going to change dramatically. I think connected television, OTT, CTV has got a new audience now that perhaps it didn't have at the beginning of 2020. And I don't think those audiences are necessarily going to go back to their old viewing habits. So I think that that's definitely, broadcasters need to think about that, because obviously it's a fundamental change in how consumers are consuming television. I do think that we are seeing an increase in the choice of ad-supported CTV content options. And I think advertisers have already started to follow the eyeballs by shifting some linear TV budgets to CTV. I don't think that, the budgets are moving as quickly as perhaps the eyeballs are, but, you see that all the time. There's generally a lag. It's just how big is the lag going to be? Or in fact, in this instance, how short is the lag going to be? And I think that's what's going to help determine also what broadcasters need to do in order to think about being more adaptable and flexible as we move into 2021 and beyond.
I can pick this up. So I'm Justin Gupta. I lead broadcast partnerships for UK and Ireland at Google. And my primary focus is enabling advanced video advertising, working with broadcasters. And I think 2020 was a leap year for broadcasting in so many ways. I think consumer adoption, as both Emma and Katie said, has jumped forwards something between 3 to 5 years. And I think the main impact has been connected TV advertising has now hit a material scale. It's between 20 and 40% for most broadcasters. It's available via digitally enabled services. And we also have quite a few digital first services now with ads. So For example, Google are doing dynamic ad insertion with Katie's team for Golf TV, and we also are working with sports broadcaster DAZN. And I think from the advertiser perspective, they're really struggling to reach their audiences with linear alone now, and broadcasters can help advertisers by enabling this addressable advertising more broadly.
I think there's definitely, as we've already discussed, very strong arguments for why evolution is important now. But we do definitely still see some lag, both on the buy side, as Emma mentioned, in terms of money going that way, and also on the sell side in terms of broadcasters transforming their own businesses. So I just want to explore quickly why we're kind of seeing a bit of slowness in movement. Emma, maybe we'll come to you first. Obviously, Video Week and Pubmatic put out some research looking at the state of sort of CTV in Europe recently, which I would highly recommend to everyone who hasn't downloaded it yet. So maybe would you talk a little bit about sort of what we saw in that in terms of why the evolution is a bit slow?
I think that a lot of the TV industry respondents that responded to that research, and thanks very much for the plug, by the way, much appreciated. I think they were hamstrung by internal competition. And a core continued focus on the core revenues generated through linear TV advertising. Now, while CTV is universally acknowledged as a growth area, development is under-resourced compared to the magnitude of change imposed by the diffusion of connected devices and new market entrants. So I think that in some instances, there is this conflict, and I'm not sitting in a broadcaster, so these guys probably be able to comment upon this more. But there's sort of this CTV is this sort of upstart, if you like, and you've got this very established linear television that generates a huge amount of revenue for anybody involved in that space. So it's about trying to, understand. I hear a lot that it's, linear or CTV. And I think Justin touched on this as well. I don't think it is either or. I think it's how do they both work together? A consumer watches both. I watch linear television and I watch connected television. I'm sure everybody else does as well. So it's about how do you bring connected television into your media plans, and that's really about understanding what's the role that it plays. So, for wanting to teach granny how to suck eggs, it's kind of old-fashioned media planning and buying, really. So what role does it play? Where does it sit in the ecosystem? What budget should you be putting there, and what's the purpose of that budget, and what's the ROI that's going to come from that budget? So I don't think it's this either or. I think it's it's both of them together. And I think that the quicker people start to understand that and get their head around that and realize it's not a competition, I expect to see it. I think that's one of the biggest barriers that we've certainly seen.
Yeah, Justin, maybe we'll come to you. You talk with broadcasters to kind of understand how you can work with them and how we can, as an industry, push forward this sort of evolution. Are there any kind of frequent things that come up that you hear about why broadcasters might be a bit slower to evolve their businesses?
Yeah, so I think on the sell side, it really comes down to the complexity of enabling this new addressable inventory, and that the devices are very fragmented. There's many different distribution platforms, and you've also got new emerging standards like HbbTV. And as I said before, until recently, the scale didn't really justify the effort. But we're now seeing some CTV platforms hitting a tipping point. So Samsung claim that 58% of their watch time is now streaming. And the good news for broadcasters is 44% of that is on ad-supported services. And obviously that's only the Samsung connected TV universe, but it gives you an indication as to how things are happening. But to Emma's point, it really comes down to how you start packaging all of your linear and digital inventory together. And I think the first priority is to enable this new complex inventory. And the first way people are generally going to market is considering it an extension of their digital sales. The second stage is then packaging this as an extension of linear as well, to address the concerns of some of those broadcasters that can't reach the consumers in the way that they wanted to in the past. But I think the end state, and we're not there yet in the UK at least, is one consolidated sales approach where you have scope for broad or narrow targeting to best serve your advertisers. I think Sky and ITV with Planet V are probably the furthest along in that approach now.
I think just to start looking at, I guess, what these evolved broadcasters will actually look like. One interesting aspect to pick up on is how content is different in that sort of world. Katie, maybe you can talk a bit about how Discovery looks at this in terms of, CTV is a different way of distributing your content, and we've seen sort of a couple of different approaches, I guess, from Discovery. We've seen both, having different niche services which are more focused on specific types of content, and then now more focused towards Discovery Plus, where everything's under one roof. And I've also heard some quite interesting stuff about just opportunities around doing some more interesting stuff content wise around making it fit within the connected home. So can you maybe just talk a little bit about the opportunities you see in terms of the content you make and how you distribute it?
I mean, first and foremost, never has it been truer that content is king, and broadcast quality, content that people like Discovery have been making for years and years is still what people want to watch, and it's still what people want to watch on a large screen, generally speaking. So they'll go to the biggest screen possible. And so then it's just about making sure that you're reaching the people who are most likely to want to access your content. And that's, as you said, you've made reference to the fact that we've got a few different products in market. We've got some very specialist, more niche products, which tend to be more end-to-end, as we call it. So short form. So Golf TV, you mentioned as an example, you can have a tutorial with Tiger Woods, you can watch live sport, or you can watch documentaries about the sport. It's really super serving passionate fans of that particular sport. But then equally, we're now pushing forward with Discovery Plus because, from a sales perspective, I think we recognise that with connected devices and with OTT, it's all about offering buyers scale, because you can't do appropriate targeting without scale. And if you have too many niche products, you're going to struggle to have scale. So I think that's why we're kind of playing around with sort of different products, but fundamentally what we are recognising is, we need to have services that attract as many viewers as possible, basically. I think just to come back to your previous question, though, on why buyers are hesitating, it is that big question of measurement. So I used to be a planner at Cara, and first and foremost, what a client wants to know is what's my reach and frequency. And at the moment, we really can't give accurate reach and frequency for a mixed AV plan, and that is going to continue to be the slight issue, and the pricing for certain audiences as well. But I think there's a lot of things in market, as we've already talked about. Sea Flight with Sky, the other broadcasters are looking at that as well. We're a partner of Sky, so we're already on board with this. And obviously, then there's Project Origin as well. So there's lots of things that are in play at the moment, but it's going to be which direction do we go, I think, is going to be the big question, because measurement is going to be key from a buyer's perspective.
I want to look some more at sort of how media buying looks in this new world. And I suppose we've seen quite a few interesting developments over the past few years. I mean, the pandemic has raised a few more questions about the upfront model, I guess. And then we've also seen through products like Planet V, more interest in these sort of self-serve platforms. So do we think that, buying and selling media is going to look really quite different to what we're used to from the traditional TV world, or is there still going to be a place for upfront style buys and media agencies having a bigger role in terms of their own negotiation?
I can share my opinion on that, and obviously guys can chip in afterwards. I think that we definitely saw that the upfronts changed over the last sort of driven by the pandemic, I think, but also maybe it was something that needed to happen anyway. And you started to see buyers wanting more flexibility in terms of what they bought, when they booked it, how much they paid for it, etc., etc. And you saw I genuinely believe that you saw the majority of the broadcasters and the publishers really respond positively to that need. So I think there has been that seismic in the terms of, not just how advertisers want to buy, but also how broadcasters want to sell moving forward. And I think that there are lots of things that we've done in the digital space that we can take into, the broadcast connected television space. I do believe that programmatic is going to play a huge part in terms of helping drive this flexibility. And, you certainly will see that, to your point, Katie, the scale Well, if you've got a programmatic solution like header bidding, for example, then that provides that level of scale that perhaps you wouldn't have had traditionally. It's certainly in the traditional linear TV space. And I think it also gets much more complicated when you start to think about the pan-European landscape. So if you look at the UK as the UK, that's fine. But then, we are a region, and there's a lot of differentiation between the markets. You reference HbbTV. Well, that's very predominant in some markets like Germany, less so in the UK. So how do we also get this balance across markets, and how does an advertiser buy CTV pan regionally? Is that even something that they can do right now? I certainly believe that that's the future, but there are definitely some barriers to that, and we need to work together to remove some of those.
I think it always strikes me that what we have here is kind of digital on the left and TV on the right. So you imagine like a Venn diagram, and these two bubbles are coming together, and that piece in the middle is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and more important. But both sides of the house are dissatisfied. The linear teams feel that the addressable stuff is not measured or traded in the same way, and the digital teams feel that it doesn't have the same fidelity of targeting or ability to do interactive ads. So both sides of the house are seeing this as their inventory minus, and it shouldn't. It should be seen as TV plus. It should be seen as TV with bells on, because if you think about it in that way, all we're doing is incrementally adding more and more interesting features to TV advertising to make it more compelling for everybody. As to programmatic, I think the way it's going to go to market is through programmatic guaranteed or automated guaranteed. Some of this comes down to kind of compliance requirements in various markets, but most broadcasters will want to review the creatives for ads, and that means that this is the best way to go to market, and it gives them the ability to make sure that they're satisfied that the ads meet with their compliance guidelines. But I think RTB is some way away, if that was where your question was going, Tim. Until we can come up with a system that allows everybody to have this full control, category clash and so forth, we're not ready yet to go to market with a proposition like that. But I do see that happening in 3 to 5 years once the majority of inventory has been digitized and people are comfortable with the access that they're able to get to it.
But yeah, let's pick up on that question of sort of open marketplace, RTB sales for TV. Do you guys think that's something that we're going to see soon down the line, or is there not just the appetite for that sort of thing yet?
I think people have to be comfortable that they know what they're getting into. And I think the first piece is access. So making sure that there is a way to trade inventory over programmatic pipes between DSPs and SSPs in a TV landscape. I think as the scale grows, you will start to see more and more of these kind of use cases. But we are moving from a very structured, planned setup to one that has more capabilities. And it may not be necessary to hit the commercial advantage in order to make everything RTB, but I do see a place for it in the future.
Yeah, I mean, TV trading is obviously a very controlled environment. There's a finite, to a certain extent, amount of inventory, and it has been traded in a certain way for quite a long time. And I think that's the kind of philosophical change that broadcasters are having to get their heads around, is that now they've got something which actually is infinite potentially, in terms of just the sheer scale of impressions that they might be delivering, but how you can trade those to get the same value as you've been getting from your linear. So there's a lot of change going on, I think, in broadcast at the moment in terms of, they need to monetize that inventory, and it can't all keep coming from traditional TV budgets, because you're just cannibalizing the revenue that's already. You've got to grow the big pot, not kind of keep looking at that one part of the pie. So yeah,
for sure.
That's what I made earlier, which is understanding the role of CTV in your media plan, and then that helps you decide where the budget's coming from. To your point, it doesn't always have to come from the traditional TV budgets. It depends on the job that you want it to do, and I think that there's still some learning that has to happen in that space. And then once people understand what's the role of CTV in the broader media plan, then I think that then we'll start to see that's a bit of a tipping point as well when people need, and then of course we need to be able to measure it properly as well.
I want to look as well at the role specifically of data, both in terms of broadcasters having their own first-party data tools thoroughly fleshed out, and then also the ability of brands to be able to bring in whatever data sets they have into the mix. How important do you think those sorts of capabilities are going to be? Are they vital essentially for broadcasters? In the next few years, or are they more kind of nice to have?
I think that first-party data capabilities is essential. I think that if I just reference the research that we've just done, I think that if we think about the UK, a lot of the respondents from the UK TV industry said that the ability to use data for targeting and to open up TV advertising to a wider pool of advertisers represented a big opportunity, if not the biggest opportunity for future growth. So I think that it's absolutely vital if we're going to grow the industry.
And it's a new capability as well. Broadcasters have never had this opportunity to get directly to the consumer before, as they now do in the OTT space. Previously on linear, you broadcast it out and everybody sees the same picture. So I think it really comes down to packaging. So whether a broadcaster wants to create those audiences, sports fans or whatever that needs to be, and how compelling can these audiences and attributes be to the advertisers. I think third-party data is a little less prevalent in the OTT and CTV space at the moment, but there's definitely a big untapped opportunity with first-party data.
Yeah, I want to look at as well a little bit at the relationships with the newer sort of CTV platforms, because obviously one of the interesting things about this change is that the companies which are acting, I guess, as the gatekeepers in the space, the CTV platforms, the Rokus, the Amazons, are different from the telcos, and we've started to hear about more of in the state side, I think, but about carriage negotiations resulting in at times services not being carried on those platforms for a little while. Katie, maybe you can give just a broadcaster perspective there on how do you approach those relationships? Is that sort of a worry for you at the moment that you become kind of beholden to Roku demanding its fee, or is that not really much of a concern for you right now?
I think it's all, we're used to, as a company that was founded on, cable, we are used to having partners in business. And so that hasn't been challenging for us. I think we were, really proud of the fact that when we launched Discovery Plus in the US on the 4th of Jan, we were on a lot of platforms that a lot of the other big SVOD services hadn't launched on. So we were on Roku, we were on Amazon, and yes, you go into partnership with those, and as long as it is at a level that makes sense for you, and that ultimately that distribution is what's important, and being able to get in front of those eyeballs is what's important. So I think we see, and in the UK in particular, we purposely made sure that we had a launch partner in Sky, because we knew that was going to immediately catapult us into more homes. So yeah, partnerships are incredibly important for someone like Discovery Plus. We really think they're valuable.
And Justin, I just want to touch quickly on your experience sort of representing Google and starting to talk about with broadcasters about how you can work with them. You hear some broadcasters might be a bit concerned about Google moving into the TV space and sort of giving up control maybe of their management of sales. How do you kind of talk with those broadcasters, and how do you ease those concerns?
Well, we operate in a highly competitive space, and we have many competitors on both the buy and the sell side. And our role here is to help broadcasters rise to the challenge of digital and adapt to this privacy safe world, and leaning into open platforms and new standards to kind of grow the size of the pie for everybody. And most of my conversations are on the sell side, where we're using new technology to unlock these new inventory types so that they can kind of realize this shift to digital based on the consumer behavior changes.
Yeah. Fabulous. And then I guess just to kind of close up, I want to look at what the steps are that the industry as a whole can be taking to sort of accelerate evolution, from broadcasters and the newer entrants as well. I guess one thing that comes up a lot is collaboration and cooperation between broadcasters. how important do you all think that is? Is that essential? Do we have to move into a new world where the broadcasts are all holding hands and singing songs together? Or can it be kept kind of minimal in terms of maybe just making sure your inventory is all available on shared platforms, but without being too closely aligned? What do you think that collaboration looks like?
I think that there are numerous ways that you can collaborate. I hadn't thought of the holding hands and singing songs together. That one is not on my list, but whatever. I think that one of the things that we've heard consistently is that it's collaboration on common technology standards that needs to be more firmly established, certainly in the European market. And I think that that's going to require constant review. And so I think that's really important. I think actually clarify the definition of CTV as well. So again, if you go into different markets, what's CTV to one person is something completely different to somebody else. And we've already referenced other protocols like HBBTV, for example. So some clarity and some consistency around the definition of CTV, I think, would also help. So I think those are two important things. I'm sure there are many others that the other panelists will have a view on.
I can pick up the HBBTV piece because I think that's a really good example where the industry can work together to get this emergent standard up to scratch. And the goal here is that we can actually replace live TV ads on connected smart TVs. And we kind of have proof of concepts and some demonstrations that show it can be done, but through collaborations between the TV manufacturers and the broadcasters and the tech providers, we can make it really, really work so that all the new TVs work in the same way and we can grow the opportunity. And I think as previously discussed, developing new measurement and targeting approaches that are digital in nature but compatible with linear TV to allow broadcasters to go to market with a total TV proposition in a privacy safe way is the way we want to grow this market.
I think there are a lot that we can take from the digital language. It's not like it's the birth of the internet. There are lots of things that we've all been doing for the last 20 years that we can take into this environment. So we can sort of hit the ground running a little bit. It's not like we have to learn everything from scratch again.
I think all I was going to say is, just thinking about it from an advertiser's perspective, it's about simplicity. And at the moment, they have no idea of the complexity of, for us, a broadcaster who has a significant amount of resource trying to get onto, as you said, all of this plethora of different platforms in multiple markets with different requirements. It feels like it shouldn't be that difficult, and yet it is incredibly difficult. And an advertiser is entirely unaware of all of that stuff that's going on. So I think the sooner we can get to a position where it is back to being about buying TV in its broadest sense, knowing, being able to target better where appropriate. But not always, not all campaigns need to be highly targeted. But I think it is about, how can we make it as easy as possible for the most important people who are advertisers to be able to reach the people they need to reach, right?
Absolutely. I'm afraid I'm going to have to wrap up the conversation there because we're out of time. But I think we covered quite a lot of ground in quite a short space of time. So thank you very much to each of my panelists. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.